Worxwide works for you.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very, very much for joining us here today. Welcome to today's session on return of experience, exploring the strategic impact of user experience on customer engagement and business performance. And of course, let me first introduce myself. I am Madhurima Sarkar. I'm the experience design lead at Worxwide Consulting. And I'm very, very thrilled to have our four industry stalwarts here with us today to share their invaluable insights. So let's dive right in. Thank you very, very much for joining us here today. So first we have our first speaker, Itamar Medeiros. He is the Vice President of Design Strategy at SAP, where he leads the design vision for SAP success factors and ensures that cohesive product narratives are happening all the time. With over 2 years of, with over 2 decades of experience in the IT sector, Itamar has worked with many global companies across China, India, and US, and many more, focusing on mostly user experience and design innovation. He's also a lecturer in UX project management in Greenwall University and has mentored future product leaders. So, Itamar's passion for design strategy and user centered innovation makes him a key voice in this field. And we are very, very excited to have him with us today to explore the return of experience. All right. Thank you very much, Itamar, for joining us here today. Next,
Thanks
we are
for having me.
privileged. Next, we are privileged to have Mr. Mukesh Jain, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Capgemini, where he leads AI-driven product innovation and enhances employee engagement through advanced analytics. With over 6 years at Capgemini, Mukesh has held key roles including Global Head of People Analytics and Global Head of Innovation in AI insights and data, driving the company's transformation into a data-driven enterprise. Before Capgemini, he was CTO at VFS Global and spent over 13 years at Microsoft. Mukesh is a very recognized leader in the technology and design industry, and we are very, very excited to hear his insights regarding the ROI of UX in today's world.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
for joining us today, Mukesh. We also have Rakesh Patel. He is the Deputy Vice President of Design at Kotak Neo, where he leads initiatives to integrate user-centered design principles into digital banking services. With a background in design from the National Institute of Design, Rakesh emphasizes empathy and user experience to enhance customer engagement in financial services. He has a very diverse career, previously working in revenue assurance and fraud prevention in telecommunication, and he also holds multiple certifications in ITIL and ETOM. Outside of work, Rakesh is very passionate about music, sports, and running marathons, and we are very excited to have him here today with us. Hey,
Thank you so
Rakesh.
much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, and finally, we are very, very delighted to introduce Puneet Arora, a senior design manager at Dell Technologies, where he leads AI and e-commerce initiatives using UX design to drive business outcomes. With expertise in agile methodologies, Puneet focuses on integrating design thinking and AI into business strategies. His work centers on enhancing user engagement and business success through innovative design solutions. Puneet has actively participated in industry panels and discussions on the intersection of UX and business, and his leadership at Dell reflects his commitment to advocating design in the digital marketplace. We are very thrilled to hear his insights on the return of experience.
Excited to be here.
Thank you very, very much. So, together, these experienced and esteemed speakers will provide invaluable insights into the realm of UX transformation, offering actionable strategies to propel your organization towards success in the digital age. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished speakers. With that, now that we have the introductions aside, let's dive right into the subject of today's discussion, which is how can we understand what kind of ROI UX is bringing into the business. So, to begin with, maybe let's begin with a different kind of a question, if that's okay. So, Mr. Arona, would you like to share with us any recent frustrating digital experience that you had that made you reflect on your perception about a brand?
Yeah, of course. So my portfolio primarily involves designing for AI applications in
Mhm.
Dell Technologies. So I'll relate my frustrations with users not being able to trust the AI systems with what we are showing them. And I think this is not just with any one single company. This is across the board. People are realizing that trust is a major factor with AI applications. When ChatGPT was released almost 2.5 years back, or in 2023 March, we all realized that hallucinations, wrong information, fabricated information were everywhere on these interfaces, right? Irrespective of whichever chat application you talk about, these are the things which are not fully authentic even yet, even after two
Right.
years. We can't trust them. And this is the reason trust, ethics, safety, all these things are a big factor when we are talking about AI applications. So my uh, team members discuss these things with me that we are having trust issues. Users are not adopting these applications. They are not believing in the numbers, or they are basically manually calculating all the things by themselves before finally kind of concurring that yes, what AI is giving us is right. And this is something which was kind of not just frustrating but time taking also, because we had to do multiple rounds of user interviews, user validations, and even improve our interfaces when it comes to discussing these frustrations with our stakeholders as well as with our users, that why we are talking about these things again and again, why we are discussing about these things, because they have already provided this information once in the first round of interviews. So this is something which kind of bothered me a lot, wasted a lot of time, and even now we see those instances where people don't still trust AI applications or the results produced by AI applications quite frequently.
Okay,
And
but
yeah,
personally,
yeah.
did you ever, encounter this kind of a situation where you also were apprehensive on, using any kind of AI application?
Yes, I think recently I can talk about that. There was a big news around Zomato rolling back its AI generated images on its app, just because the kind of imagery they generate is unbelievable, and probably people get deceived by what they see on the app. And that was also deceivable for me, because what you actually get when you order something is very different from what you see on the interface. And this is not something which you pay for, or this is not something which you want to trust, right? And again, when you see that experience, you definitely want to talk to customer care, you want to talk to your friends, family, spread a word of mouth about why this is happening. And this is something which definitely affected me, that if this is happening with an app which I use on a weekly basis so regularly for myself as well as for my family, and this is something which is very common in India, Zomato app, what will be the case of people who are just trusting these apps blindly? And it's not just Zomato, but there are so many other apps who are using AI generated imagery and calculations in their interfaces.
Right. So I'm sure that also changed the perception of Zomato as a brand for you. I mean, they had to roll back a complete, a huge, deployment that they had done just because it didn't work.
Absolutely 100%. But I think they are smart enough, and they are one of probably the smartest user centered design organizations. And that's the reason they listen to the user feedback. They immediately roll back that function, and they clearly mention that they are not going to use AI generated images in their app, or when they are showing the pictures of food related articles on their app, which I think something which is a bold move. It's a courageous move to accept your mistake, correct it, and then move on.
Right. All right. That, I mean, it does reflect that for some time, of course, there, your perception about the Zomato brand did suffer. But since you're such a big loyalist of Zomato, I do see it coming back now that they have listened to the users and they have implemented what the users are actually looking for. So
Absolutely.
talking about listening to users, which is what we call user experience, understanding how the users experience any digital interface. So my next question will be to Mr. Itamar. So Itamar, do you think that UX is becoming a very critical factor in today's competitive business landscape?
Yeah, so I think we all instinctively know, especially in the personal experience. We just saw our distinctive guest here talk about how a particular bad experience hurt the brand, right? Let's say we all intuitively know that that's critical, but I think what a lot of design organizations especially in enterprise software fail to do is like, yeah, but show me the data. What is the correlation between bad experience and the bottom line?
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm gonna quote the work of a couple of my colleagues in SAP, TJ Kite and Emanuela Hogdaki. They actually went through the trouble of digging up the data of like things like product satisfaction scores and do the correlation on business metrics that business leaders are more familiar with, right? So they were able to prove A plus B that the higher rates of churn on our products usually happens to the products where the PSAT scores are lower. Right. So I think that this is what people like me and other leaders in the organization need to do a little bit better. Is like instead of just talking about how experience is good for the business, you actually have to demonstrate how experience is good for the business, right? By using the same language that the business leaders are familiar with, things like churn rate, adoption, attrition, and so on.
All right. So, I mean, it's very interesting to know that, businesses are now looking for data to support any kind of design decisions that are being taken. Because, like we know that any design decision, it comes with a big cost, and businesses first want to gauge that if it's worth investing in that cost and what kind of returns they are going to get by investing in that.
That's
Uh,
correct.
so, I mean, what you said is very interesting, and maybe we can delve a little bit deeper. So, my next question will be for Rakesh. So, Rakesh, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about what you feel are the key indicators of UX maturity. Since you're working in the field of data and finance, I mean, and of course, fraud in finance is one of the biggest issues, and I mean it's very difficult to always be on the stepstones thinking what might happen next. So there are a lot of the things that go into taking any small decision also. So maybe you can give us a little bit of insights on what are the key indicators of UX maturity and how do you gauge it in your organization?
Sure. So, not towards a fraud, but what I feel is I'll just dig deep in terms of structuring the process of what one should do, like what process. Like normally, let's say for example, UX has not been well entertained or
Mm-hmm,
it's been used prominently. So if at all it's been used, we always say we need to find and fund up a user need. But then what
mm-hmm,
is user need? We need to go beyond the word user need and dig deep and go at a psychological level, go at a behavioral level, maybe at a cross-functional level, at a scenario level, for example. There are so many touch points which has to be thought through versus just having a tag of user need. That's one of the thing. Few of my colleagues, from few of my colleagues, what I understood was we really need to also have a dedicated budget in terms of what bandwidth has to be given to sustain all processes in a structured way in an organization. So let's say how much bandwidth you're giving to do research, for example, right? How much bandwidth
mm-hmm,
you're having to let's say to conduct, let's say, usability, for example, and that too in
mm-hmm,
a structured way, not in a way which is in a hurried way, for example. There are a couple of touch from organizational level, which I feel which defines how much mature and how much forefront an organization is towards UX maturity. So yeah.
All right. I mean, that's pretty insightful. So, what you're saying is that since there are budget involved, it's not just one person, but it's like, a need of a change in the mindset of the whole organization, because everyone has to be attuned to not just the user needs, which we are looking at from a big spectrum, but also the smaller, like, things that make up the user need, be it psychology or the touch points or everything else. So, in that case, what do you think are the hurdles that organizations face when they are trying to adopt UX maturity frameworks?
See, one hurdle, I'll just break this into three parts. At an individual designer level, for example, at a product level, or at an organizational level. So at an individual level, what I feel is one thing what becomes a fiction is flexibility in thought process is what I feel. Like when you have business goals to take care of, when you have user needs, or when you have user goals to to given more prominence, for example, as a designer, then we might forget to zoom out and see things from diverse lens, because we are we are in the front line to think beyond the traditional things. And if we'll not be flexible in thought process, maybe then that's something which we need to think through. Broadly, a thinker's mindset or a strategy mindset, right? That's at an individual level. At a product level, what I feel is UX doesn't get mature. I think UX evolves with time. UX kind of thing goes beyond what it used to, give in a first version. So how in depth to understand the journey of UX is something which we need to think through. And then at an organizational level, as I told, along with budget and all, how much audits, maybe biased or unbiased, how much audits you do also defines how much importance you give to UX. And if at all you have these three things under the belt, then there won't be hurdles. But if not, then definitely I think there will be hurdles which companies and organizations will face at multiple levels. So yeah.
All right, so UX audit itself, like, seems to be another, like, huge segment which we can talk about definitely. But then again, in the paucity of time, we will move on to our next question, which is more moving towards the more technical side of UX. And this question goes to Mukesh. So, Mukesh, with your decades of experience in, amalgamation of experience and technology, could you provide an example of a company that significantly improved its business outcomes with UX transformation?
See, in my experience, right, I worked for Microsoft for 13 years, and after moving back to India, several companies. And now, as part of my role in Capgemini, right, looking at the whole end-to-end processes of an organization, and then recommending what would be the right solution for them, including a UI UX, will be key part of it. So I'm sure some of you are using Outlook already, right? And you probably know how it has Outlook has evolved. And some of you have observed, you would have seen the tasks which used to take certain steps, precisely 7 steps. Some of the tasks you used to take on Outlook, it has been reduced to 2 steps, right? The whole ribbon part of it on the part, right? The UI UX, right? So I always believe that there are two type of under data we can collect. One is implicit, another one is explicit. Implicit, right? Which means the activity which you are doing, right? Can we collect the data without interfering with the user experience to understand how much time does it take, how much steps does it take for people to complete a task? And at the same time, look at understanding that is it easy or intuitive for people to do those parts. Now, once we get more deep into those, we were able to find out at Microsoft, I'm talking about year 2000, 2002, right? We were able to find out that some tasks are taking as high as 7 steps. How can we simplify it such that the UI UX, which means depending on what you're doing, when you're on PowerPoint, you're doing certain activity, the menu changes. Excel, the menu changes. The ribbon changes. The purpose of the changes in the ribbon is so that any activity can be done in 1 step or 2 step. Let me give a specific example. This was the year 2000. I was working in Microsoft, working with Bill Gates, and I saw him doing right-click unread 25 years back. Right-click unread. And I was curious, why is Bill Gates doing right-click unread on email? I asked him. He said, oh, I want to follow up on this email. Sure. There's a feature in Outlook called flag for follow-up. Click here, and click here. And Bill Gates looks at me and said, tell me, Mukesh, that's 3 clicks. Obviously, I was making the mistake. 3 clicks Bill Gates doesn't like. 2 click he likes it, which is right click unread. Wrong way to do it, but that's what it is. What is better than 2 click? 1 click. You see the flag on the right side of the Outlook? I built that feature in 4 days to be able to solve the problem of Bill Gates. So how a UI experience is there. So when I talk about success stories, it's about, can we make it simpler for people to use it? That was the beginning of collecting the data and doing it, but multiple transformations within Microsoft, Outlook, Hotmail, Bing, MSN, I was part of those teams, always about how do we change it. One major change, I'll talk about a success story, which I've already talked about in some of my earlier session, is color. Right? If I ask you, right, what color is if the message is, you will be more likely to click. And you probably will not agree that yes, psychologically, we do click on some of this element. I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a designer. I'm a technical person. I'm just an AI person. So I ask this obvious question. Why is the Bing search results blue in color? Of course, it was so obvious. The head of Bing said, Mukesh, that's because you're supposed to click on it. I said, fine. But why that shade of blue? This is also blue. This is also blue. Why that shade of blue? He said, Mukesh, blue color is a color of trust, blah, 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 data, everything. I said, yes, I agree, all of them. Why this shade of blue? We ran an experiment. Again, everything is with data. We ran an experiment for 2 weeks. 10 different shades of blue were tried with 10% randomly chosen people across the globe. The 5th shade of blue was the one we were using at that time. Bing was using at that time. I'm talking about 2007. Within 2 weeks, we found out the 9th darker shade gave us 42% more click-through. Talking about UI success stories, I don't think anybody else needs to be proven that Mera Wala Blue, my favorite blue, what the Asian Pen ad says, right? It's not about Mukesh Jain's favorite or your favorite. It is about in Hindi, there's a movie, right? Dulhan Wahi Jo Piya Man Bhai. Translation in English, personalization. So it is personalization that people love certain shades, make it easier for them to take it. And that, I would say, the best success story is, which helped us increase significant revenue in Bing in the year 2007. So you got the idea about it. It plays a very important role. I didn't know how much money I'm going to make. I just wanted to see, is this the right shade? Just a curiosity, a child curiosity helped us to get some success there.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, I had no idea about this story, and I'm very, very, honored to hear it firsthand that, this kind of a small change, which we always think, it's the smallest thing possible, a shade of a color. Who even thinks of that? But even that has so much of impact on increasing revenue, and not just increasing revenue, making it people's favorite, basically. Like you said, preferences of people. I mean, that is amazing. And I think we have a lesson to learn from here, that we always have to be curious, even about the smallest things present, because that's when we'll be actually able to hear what our users have to say. So thank you very much for sharing this story with us, Mukesh. I think a lot of us, have a lot to think about now that you have shared it. Maybe we can also, know about the perspective from the other side of the world. So, Itamar, would you also like to share your design perspective on this? Maybe you can also provide us an example of how a company significantly improved its business outcomes through UX transformation.
Well, thanks for asking that question. Here, I alluded earlier in the call about this intuition that we have that there was a correlation between satisfaction and the bottom line. So that was step number one, right? Say we went through the painstaking process of collecting the data. Of, let's say, in SAP we do have a little bit of tooling that allows people to provide us feedback directly from the application, right? And then we saw this correlation between satisfaction scores dropping in a particular area of our portfolio and the churn going up, right? Say, and it's one of those cases where it's very expensive to acquire new customers. It's probably more expensive to acquire new customers than to keep the current ones. So we did. So we that was let's say that's how UX and user research kind of tied to the strategy, right? Say so if we want to reduce attrition or reduce churn, let's improve the satisfaction, right? That's where we created this initiative, and I think, let's say, I will be more than happy to share the material later, that we went through this transformation where we put the whole focus of our line of business in success factors, which deals with HR software. We put a lot of effort on the user experience side of our portfolio, right? So there was even a big bet at the L1 level called Win with UX. So the idea here is like there was a 2-year very intense focus on, instead of trying to do minor innovations, we put a concentrated effort on making a big revamp of the user experience of our portfolio. And this is where going back to the PSAT scores, that we see the big change, right? So if we have to spend 2 years working on the portfolio just to measure if things are improving or not, it could have backfired. I'd say, I guess in general, everybody would agree that better experience is great, but we wouldn't really know where we are making a difference, right? And then we saw like because this was a 2-year initiative, and the data is collected basically on regular basis. We saw the PSAT scores going up as the initiative progressed, to a point that not that we are going to de-invest on user experience, but now that we have a breathing room to focus on other things like AI and so on, right? But in my mind, it's becoming very clear that and I think we saw the examples from Microsoft there, right? Say it's really hard to know if we're making a difference if you're not able to measure things, right? So this is where measuring is really critical. And designers, I think, let's say to the designer people on the call, this is something I think you're going to need to become very comfortable with, right? Let's say be able to not just talk about design, but like show like the differences making through data.
Right. I mean, it's fabulous to know how UX plays a key role in triggering increased business outcomes. Small changes, of course, we are looking at, but like you said, you have spent 2 years in transforming the experience of SAP. And I have also used SAP extensively in my previous organization. Like, we have used a lot of apps of SAP. And I do know, 5 years back, what SAP was. Now the experience itself is completely different. I mean, I had a different training session for just using SAP, which was, I think, 2 weeks long, just to know the nitty-gritties of what has to be done where. And once, I could see some changes coming in, actually the experience became so much easier. And I mean, whoever new joined our team, we didn't have to give them such long training sessions and KT sessions on what has to be done. Things were much more intuitive and people could just pick off where they needed to. So I mean, thank you very much, Itamar, for sharing this example, and thank you very much for making our life easier by bringing this kind of user oriented changes in the software. That's great
Yeah,
to know.
I'm glad to hear that. So
So, in that case, maybe you also mentioned something very important, that, it's really hard to know if you're making a difference unless you can measure it. So, unless we are measuring something, it is not something we can manage. So, in that case, how can organizations, what steps can organizations take to prioritize UX in their strategy? Like, I know a lot of organizations might be hesitant to spend a very long time in revamping their user experience. So, how can they prioritize that in that case?
well, so I think in not just for design, but basically any kind of transformation you need to make, you need to, and I think going back to business metrics, right? Let's say you want to demonstrate the shortest time to value on anything that you make an investment on, right? So be design systems, be user research, be putting the infrastructure to collect data. So if you have to come up with a plan, it's like, oh, by the way, we should invest in design, and here's like a 10-year plan, and we need a $500 million and stuff. Like nobody's gonna do that, right? So you need to use the same strategy, like the same strategic tools that any other kind of transformation will need to go. And at least in my mind, I would suggest focus on like what is the choices, what are the investments that gets you to the shortest time to value. And that's one thing. The other thing is you kind of have to s- spell out what value here means, right? Let's say going back to the leaders of the organization, if we were to invest X amount of dollars on building up our design system or hiring more designers or doing X, Y, and Z, what is the value that you're gonna get? Right? You know what I mean? It's like because like everybody is gonna say, yeah, Apple is great. There's great culture, great design there, but it's really hard to like unless you say in 2 years or 3 years we're gonna become like Apple. It's really hard to make a business case on like what is the value that you're gonna get if you make an investment on hiring or putting up any kind of infrastructure like a design system.
Right. So I mean, like you already mentioned, like, sometimes the roadmap, like, might seem a little bit more lengthy. So we have to, like, figure out more creative ways to do the prioritization ourselves to see what works for us and what will bring us more benefits. So, Puneet, would you like to add something in this? Like, how, like, can organizations, big organizations prioritize UX decisions and UX in their overall growth strategy?
Think it's a good follow-up to UX first culture discussion. So, in my experience, I think we should always start from the top because if we just say that I want a big team size of 50 designers, 100 designers to do all these things or revamp all these applications, that doesn't work. We have to show them the plan and we have to start small and build on those successes. Probably sprint over sprint or quarter over quarter to show that yes, this works and this works effectively when we scale it up across applications, across geographies, or even across business functions. So I think integrating the UX goals into companies' vision and mission statements, and even probably what we call these days as OGSM, objectives, goals, strategies, and measures kind of thing, which I think yearly rolls down from the top to the bottom rung employee. It definitely helps in achieving and analyzing those metrics that we are trying to uh, build with UX first culture. So one definitely is that. Second is we need to also introduce some user UX metrics in all these objectives or even the measures we are trying to take, like customer retention or net promoter score, or even revenues that get impacted positively by introducing designers or design org in these objectives. Second is we need to advocate these things as a leader. And as Rakesh said sometime back, that we have been doing this for a long time and we still need to continue to do it. It's not because designers are not respected, they are not heard of, heard to. I think it's mainly to do with the user centricity, which generally people tend to forget time over time because we have generally seen heavier engineering engagements in most of the MNCs or even startups. They are built with engineers, with developers, because that's what goes out into the product. But what makes it engaging, what makes it usable, easier to use, is the design side of it or the user centric side of it. So we need to also look at how we can engage with different audience within the group or within the company to make them feel that this is where design needs to be brought in. This is where design can impact the product the most, and this is where we can make things more engaging, more user friendly. And probably it has to start from the C level suite or the C suite. That's what I would say. The other thing is, and very important thing these days, especially when I gave example of Zomato, is to also make sure that we have a customer feedback culture where we are listening to everybody what they are saying about our products. Sometimes it is not just the customers outside the organization. Sometimes people who are giving us feedback within the team itself that I don't think it is working, I don't think it's right. Sometimes that feedback is also very important for us to include in our products. So customer centricity, using tools which are giving you feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down, or any comments people are talking, people are giving on different platforms like Google reviews or Mouthshut, or even on Amazon. If your product is being sold on Amazon, definitely helps us understanding a lot about how people see it, how people choose these products. And last but not the least, I think we also need to make sure that we invest rightly in the UX talent and tool. I know we have all come from either design backgrounds or engineering backgrounds as at least leaders at this stage. When there was nothing called UX design, we used to call ourselves Photoshop or MS Paint designer. So things like that, right? I mean, it all started with that, and eventually we have reached here. But we also need to make sure that we have the right UX talent in place. People understand the importance, they know how to do things, and they are very hands-on into those things. Just not just talk about these things, because I do see a lot of things these days. When during COVID, a lot of people got converted into UX designers. Some of them are doing fabulous, but some of them are not able to uh, carry along where they are needed, right? So those kind of things. And then tools are also very important. Please make sure that when you are hiring a designer, you are giving them the right tools. Don't give them something which is outdated. Don't give them something which is cheap but is not working well. So I think we have seen a lot of usage of tools like Figma, Miro, or AI generated tools like Chat GPT, which are being which have been helping the designer with research and a lot of other stuff, is also something which people can think about.
Okay, I mean, thank you very much for this wonderful perspective. I mean, it defines that, of course, tools are very, very important, and we should, invest in the right tools for getting the right output. However, what's more important, like you mentioned, is investing in the craft itself, understanding our users better, getting deeper into the user's skin to understand their, deep needs, nuances, and then designing accordingly. So thank you for this wonderful perspective, Puneet. And like you also mentioned, we have to, engage with different audience across our company. To actually bring in a change in the organization level, and it has to start with the C-suite leaders itself. However, I mean, it's not just the leadership. This has to be achieved only by bringing all the diverse perspectives, together, by breaking silos, which will lead to better solutions, perhaps. And the leaders will steer us with, those towards the correct direction. So, taking that into perspective, so Rakesh, the next question goes to you. What
Yeah,
role does cross-functional collaboration play in fostering a UX first culture?
sure, sure. I feel it's really important. I think every cohort of expertise brings its own importance and its own lens of looking at the same information. For example, if someone is a product manager, they are SMEs of that particular product. They know in and out about how this might evolve from going further. Let's say if you're a UX writer, they know the nuances of how to grab the attention with by adding just a header or a subtext. If you're a designer, and then what information hierarchy you want to structure so that it becomes super easy for user to for the user to understand. And when this three different mind comes together, then everyone will have their own debates, everyone will have their own perspectives, everyone will have their own say towards towards the best possible UX or best possible solution you want to give. Again, all depend on the context for sure, right? In this entire process, what I feel is how much bandwidth you have to go and go super crazy to have best possible solution versus how much mellow you can go because of some constraint, because of some tech challenges, because of some, let's say, I'm from broking industry, so for Kotak Neo I have some compliance challenges which comes around. So with those things taken into consideration, what's the best possible solution one can give is something which we all aim for, right? And then once, let's say, the development takes place, the feature goes live, the life doesn't stop here. I think further also how to grab there are other problems which we need to also solve. For example, the discoverability issue of the feature or the product or which has been launched, for example, or let's say the accessibility issue, again when user will land. For example, if I say from persona's perspective, let's say first users who are coming on the app for the first time, or the normal users who are already using app for multiple times. So how are you breaking experiences for all the users? Again, the context is what, if the context is to acquire new users, fair. You have to make journey super simple to consume. If the context is to cater to advanced or intermediate users, you might want to go a little detail in terms of information. So there's so many things which comes in mind when it's about collaboration, and each cohort brings their own expertise, and they kind of want to have the best possible version for the product and for the organization. So yeah.
Right. So it's like everyone wants to have the best, but there will be differences in opinion, and we have to navigate very strategically, always keeping one thing in mind, which is our end users.
Yeah, like I'll give one more example. Okay, so one of the key KPIs what was given to us was, since again it's a trading tool, right? So after onboarding on, let's say, Kotak Neo, if his user is going to do a three trades, so that three user i- self coming on after finishing onboarding doing three trades was a key KPI which was been given. Now for user to put an order or do an investment, it, the, eh, I might not just invest in, let's say, without knowledge, for example, or there are users who might do also, who knows. But then that is, he or she will have some rationale towards it. So to understand that rationale, we need to sit together to understand, okay, fine, why someone comes on platform, go on, let's say, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to place an order, or let's say follow, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, for example, right? So that information structure needs to be thought through across the table, and it needs it needs attention also, because we are, in my scenario, we are we are having an opportunity to help user to invest. Money is involved. What is valued most, one of the most important thing right now is, so there is no margin of error in communicating or in having the structure. So yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it's n not too easy, of course, but it's typically a little bit more easier to focus on different cohorts of users of one product. However, when we have multiple products in our portfolio, for example, SAP, so in that case, how do we focus on different cohorts of users? Because the different tools that SAP has, all of them are very, very different to each other. They are trying to solve completely different needs. So in that case, what kind of users can we focus on? So perhaps, Itamar, you can share a little bit of your perspective, that how do we prioritize which UX improvements to focus on when resources are limited, and along with that, when we have so many different products and so many different users to focus on, so what kind of prioritization can we pray in that case?
Yeah, prioritization is it's a very hot topic because there's so many frameworks out there, right? Um, so what I usually encourage the teams to consider is priorities should be based on goals, right? On what is that you're trying to achieve, right? So are you trying to increase revenue? Are you trying to reduce attrition and so on? So the that's kind of the first lens, right? Let's say based on what is the goal, what is the right questions that we need to ask, right? Um, we've been using we've been using a lot jobs to be done as a framework in SAP success factors, right? So the jobs to be done provides this lens where we can identify areas where customers are satisfied or not satisfied with our offerings, and they consider important or not important for them to complete their job, right? So with when you collect these two data points, we can identify opportunities of what are the things that customers consider extremely important and they're extremely dissatisfied, right? So this is one take of, let's say, maybe this is one data point for us to think of, like maybe these areas are the things that we should probably focus on, at least from the experience perspective, because customers are telling us that they find it important and they're extremely dissatisfied. But that's only the user experience side of or the satisfaction side of the problem, right? I think business leaders also need to consider other perspectives, right? Let's say, what are the business metrics that we need to achieve, right? So reduce churn and attrition. So there's, in the ideal world, there's this Venn diagram where we have the customers or user goals in one side of the diagram, and our business objectives that we are trying to achieve. So if we find that sweet spot of what are the functionality or what are the product offerings that we could make that drive both, this would be the perfect prioritization method, right? I've seen a lot of product teams use RISE, right, which is like reach, impact, confidence, and effort, because it's like it's a very good kind of conversation tool, because people need to plug the numbers there for each. But every prioritization method has its pros and cons, right? The jobs to be done, I mentioned that it's very focused on the user experience or the customer experience side, but doesn't take in consideration the goals. Reach is very good because it has the RISE, because it has reach and impact, because that does consider business goals, but because there's this very focus on the effort, right? Say, oh, what are the features that we can invest that with the least amount of effort that would drive the reach and impact? The problem is, like, if you keep using RISE over time, you end up only prioritizing the low hanging fruit, right? Because like all the things that there's more effort to build, and usually, let's face it, a lot of the functionality, a lot of the experience that really drives the the let's say the innovation, right? For example, just look at all the stuff that Apple puts out, right? Say all the great functionality that really creates that wow effect. You will probably, if you look under the hood, probably it was not as more effort to put. That's usually why companies like Apple, they are very late into bringing innovation, because they want to put the effort on building great functionality, right? So this is the balance that you have to create in terms of picking a prioritization method. Pick a method and practice this so that people are very comfortable in using, but acknowledge what are the limitations of the prioritization methods. That's what would be my recommendation.
All right. I mean, what you just mentioned with regards to low-hanging fruit, I had also done a project where, we focused heavily on the RISE framework, and we were trying to find all the low-hanging fruits. But at the end of the day, what happened is that we did, do a lot of design changes in, whatever we could in terms of low-hanging fruit. But the needle movement was very less, because I mean, we had to focus on deeper issues, and we kind of lost focus in there. And this was long back, but that was a big lesson for me also, that when we use frameworks, we have to use them with a pinch of salt, and we have
Mhm.
to acknowledge, what are the fallacies, or what are the, drawbacks of that framework before we use anything. So I mean, thank you very much for the perspective. uh, so we talked about the importance of intercompany collaboration. We talked a lot about what kind of tools, what kind of frameworks that we can use. Now perhaps it's time to focus on the most important part of user experience, which is of course the users. So maybe Mukesh, you can tell us a little bit more about, you already mentioned in your story, how you have picked up feedback right on spot. You have given the example of Bill Gates, where he was going through something in front of you, and you could already see what the problem was. But then again, for others, so what role does user feedback play in spotting the UX gold mines?
See, important part to notice here is every user, when they're coming and using our application, their target is get my things done as fast as possible. And our goal on our application could be that I want the user to be here on the site for a longer time, or I want the user to do these things, right? So there will always be an overlap. I'm not using the word conflicting, but there is not always in line, right? So for example, when the user is coming here, understanding the intent, why the user came over here, right? And then giving them option at the right time. We all know if you try as soon as we learn about UX, we know Amazon when they launched the coupons for the first time, the sale went down. Sale went down. Why? Because there was an option, big and bright. Hey, before you make the payment, do you have a coupon? People were not aware of couponing thing at that time online. Oh, there are coupons available. Oh, let me go and find a coupon, and the sale was lost. Right. So we have to understand at the right time what is the intent of the particular person. So, for example, when you are on YouTube and you see 7 recommendations, you click on one of them. Right. That doesn't mean that the other 6 were bad. Is the implicit no, explicit no, implicit yes, explicit yes. So understanding those part of what a user is doing while they are going through an experience and capturing those information to see what works and what does not work. You have been throwing Pizza Hut ad to Mukesh Jain for 5 times. Mukesh will not click on it. That means it's an explicit no. Compared to you're throwing 2 advertisements, Mukesh will only pick on 1 advertisement, right? So understanding that balance is important. That's the first part of it. The second important part here is, like, for example, I recently experienced, again, I normally don't take the brand name, but let me just take it here for easy. Air India, like I was always a Vistara customer, but now after the merger, I started using Air India. My name is Mukesh Jain, but my legal name is Mukesh Kumar Jain. Somebody will put space, somebody will not put space. My booking, somebody booked my ticket, and I go and put my frequent flyer number. Sorry, frequent flyer number invalid. No, it is not invalid. It is valid. No, your name is not matching. Come on, there is a space. Come on, right? Those things are bad experience. Then I go to the check-in counter. Can you please add my number? No, it's not allowed. By the way, once the trip is over, you can do retro. It's an obvious problem. I'm sure hundreds of people are going through that, right? Someday, fix it, right? So those understanding those pain point, because people are going through journey. And what are the journey? After ticket is booked, people come to the site for only 2 or 3 things. Book a meal, select a seat, and or add the frequent flyer number. So having those understanding and designing the flow and making it work is what I would expect as an owner of the application to do it, because that is the signal people are telling you, right? Any inconvenience, yes, the user will have talk about it negatively, but at the same time, it actually costs more work for them to fix it at some point. So I hope that understand, right? We need to understand and respect the user and understand their journeys, when they come, why they come, what they're coming there for, and picking up that's the signals. That's why I'm all about capturing the data for when the user is doing, what is their experience. And of course, feedback also always works, but capturing the experience while they're doing it, it's a big gold mine for us.
All right. I mean, that's a very important thing, to always be aware and always, notice what the users do and how they do it. And rather than just ask them, questions about it, because that is what actually is is the underlying base of user experience design. So, Puneet, would you like to add anything to this? What role does user feedback play in spotting UX gold mines?
So I have worked with 2 of the biggest IT hardware makers in the tech world, HP and then Dell, and they have been producing a lot of hardware gear for consumers around the globe. From although I've been involved in the digital experience, but I have closely observed and learned a lot from the hardware or the physical experience also, physical design side. So what I can tell you is that what Mukesh talked about are the things that people experience and how you can sort them or how you can make them better. But many times I've seen that people, by trying out a lot of things, also give some solutions to us which we don't even listen to, which we don't even look at, right? Uh, we are so much engrossed in the engineering prowess of our own team members, of our developers, that we think we are the best and we know how to fix it, or we know what could the customer be experiencing. But sometimes, or not sometimes, many times, even the customers provide some very basic cost effective solutions to these problems in the feedback which we are not paying attention to. One is that, right, that if we are paying attention to them very closely, minutely, we are probably able to do these innovations, these cost-effective ways of fixing things in a very, very effective way, especially in countries like India. Very recently, I heard this in Economic Times that uh, I'll give you an example from the industry itself. So I think it was there in the news couple of weeks back, not very old news, that OnePlus and many other phone companies are experiencing and noticing that customers are complaining about a green line that develops in just in the middle of the screen for majority of the phones, and they were not paying attention to it earlier. But now that people have started returning their phones, or they have been very loud on the social platforms about these problems, these companies have started paying attention to it, and now they figured out that it is not because of some malfunction with the display or because of how customers are using it. It is primarily because of the temperature factor, where customers are using these phones in temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius. In many regions in India, that's where these problems are coming, that green line that develops in the middle of the screen. Now they have started working on it and started designing and developing those screens, keeping in mind the temperature across different regions in India. Right? If you so that is another example. If you pay close attention to what people are saying, you don't need to spend a lot of money and research on thinking or rethinking about the same thing. Basically, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can start from where you are being told that this is where the problem is, and just fix this, and people will be happy with that.
Right. So, I mean, we need to not just hear what customers are saying, we need to actually listen to what
Yeah.
users and customers are saying so that we can incorporate those in our designs. Rakesh, would you like to share your perspective for this?
Sure, definitely. I think feedbacks are really, really important. There's no hard measures when it comes to feedback, and I would like to, have narrate a couple of stories of how we have integrated in our own platform. So again, being a broker as a platform, there'll be traders on the platform, right? And imagine at 9 o'clock when they start looking at charts, when they start doing analysis, how much of cognitive load they'll have on the eyes. And when we had our first MVP, uh, there were a lot of feedbacks for having a dark mode, because eyes used to, like eyes, they were facing so much issues because I had to constantly observe charts, be it candlestick, be it, let's say, RSI. There are multiple things which they look into, and it was so much for them that with the normal bytes, or the normal mode, it was not possible. It was like difficult. So that one insight, that because we need to reduce cognitive load on, and that to analyze, and it impacts the way you analyze or the way you do to read the information. Also, you need to solve that versus anything else. So once the MVP stage was, and then we had launched a dark mode, and then we had got appreciation also about, it's been implemented good, whatever. Now feedbacks are really funny also in a way. Okay, like if you go to Play Store or App Store reviews, no one will complain that your UX is bad, because what user will complain will be about functionality or the utility part of it. So UX always comes as a byproduct in the overall or the holistic experience of what you do. And if the functionality is something which has been causing friction, it's a trigger for us to think through a little bit more. So for all those touch points, what we normally what we followed was system design approach. I would say, like, in system design we have feedback loops which we need to fill in, for example, right? So we need to have, let's say, fill the gap between the user and the end user and the organization. Now, how to do that, and how to do it in an organic way wherein they also feel comfortable sharing what is happening on the platform. So we had got a simple feedback loop in support section wherein they can just share a feedback with a screenshot or with a screen recording of whatever they are facing, comment on it, and then that has been integrated in our Slack channel. So whatever feedback they have, every second we can, we get a feedback on, let's say, XYZ, and then if something is alarming for us, if something is really important, and if it has a huge impact, we definitely prioritize it and solve it. So that's how feedbacks have been, incorporated, at least in my organization, and it's been valued a lot with whomsoever, be it for the new user, be it for the experienced user. So yeah.
All right. I mean, that's very important to have feedback loops wherever, we can incorporate them. And with that, I mean, we do have a couple of questions that have come to us. So perhaps, maybe we can start off with the first question, which is that, it's a general question. So Shreya, has asked this question that, she has seen that multiple discussions around users don't read versus providing enough information to nudge them to take a decision. So, what is would you want to take this question on? What is your take on, determining informational content on websites in today's world? So, how do we understand what kind of information we should put? Because nowadays, the, cognitive load of any user is so high, and there is so much of informational content to consume every day. I mean, I was reading somewhere a couple of days back that the amount of content that we are, already consuming in one day is equal to the amount of content that people used to consume in a month before industrial revolution. So if that is the kind of, world we are living in, so how do we understand, how much information we should provide when it comes to designing journeys, and how should we, move ahead in that direction to make it easier for users to consume the information?
So shall we
Uh,
jump in? Can I
yes,
answer that question?
of course, yes, of course, Itamar.
Yeah, so here's what I mean, I think this is a variation of a bigger problem when it comes to experience, which is like, how do you provide the experience that meets the level of proficiency or expertise that the user has, right? If people need to read something to make a decision, that's fine, right? But I guess there's two questions to be asked, right? I say, are people familiar? Have they done the homework before they make a decision, right? So if the answer is yes, then I guess you don't want to interrupt them with reading, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, if the decision has some life-changing implications, you don't want people to make the decision lightly, right? So I think that there's a balance to strike, is like, how do we optimize for flow, as in, like, how do we let people that are comfortable with making a decision go through their decision process fast, but on the other hand, not take it so lightly that people just do, let's say, oh, we put a default there, and the default ends up being like what most people take, right? So there's a balance, right? It's like, can people read about this decision? Can for example, if there's supplementary information that they can get access, can that be available somewhere else, and then we can point people to it, right? If a decision is not so critical, do we really need to interrupt people with a bunch of text that they need to read, right? So I think these are some of the things that I would consider.
Okay, I mean, we do have to look at what's the most important part of the information, the crux of it, and then we need to see how we can, soften it for the user's level of understanding and their mental model. So thank you very much for taking this question, Itamar. I'll move on to the next question that we have, which is that what advice would you like to give organizations just starting their journey in UX? So this question, maybe I can ask Mukesh, because, he has worked in multiple organizations. So, I mean, and he also mentioned that, he's talking of examples which were there in 97 and 2007. So for new organizations who are just getting into UX, how can they just get started in the journey?
See, there are three ways to look at it, right? First and foremost, right, definitely there's a theoretical element of tried and tested things. I think definitely those foundation need always to be there. Second one, which I really like, and which I encourage all of you to try it out, right? To ask the simple question, how many of you use UPI? I'm sure all of you will say yes. But my next question will be, how many different applications you use in UPI? And I think the answer will be 2, 3, 4, or 5 max. I use 27 UPI applications. You might be wondering why I'm using 27 UPI application. It's experience, right? All these companies, startups, are spending millions of dollars, right, in creating the great product and great user interface and user experience, right? Can we learn from all this part, right? Look at it and will you be able to tell which is the best UPI experience application you have, which is the best airline application you have, which is the best Uber or Ola, multiple of those, right? The more you use, the better understanding you get about what to do and more important, what not to do, right? So that experience learning will actually help you do even better. That's point number 2. Okay. First foundation is that. Second one, you're experiencing other things and all. And third, monitor things which is working perfectly fine, right? I started my career in DOS, right? Writing command on the command line, right? And now it's everything is done and you just have to think about it. And then at some point you think about it and the command will be executed at some point in future, of course, right? But now the important part is how can I capture what's going on the user's mind, okay, and what the use cases are doing, and I build something that I can do to monitor. My thought was people will do 1, 2, 3, 4 and they'll get things done. Is 4 enough? Should we do 3? Should we do 2? Or something else can be done in future so I can reduce the task or reduce the information overload, cognitive overload for the user. And that innovation it comes out, and that comes only from the data. Some of my fellow panelists have great examples about as soon as we see a drop in certain experience level, and that we can see that translated into churn. Can we prove that part? Almost impossible. When I wrote my second book on performance, and some of the Microsoft products were slow in performance, somebody asked me this question. Okay, I don't think performance matter. If people come and they will do it. Yes, people come and do it if there is no other choice. We have to book a railway ticket. We have to go at 8 a.m., 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. depending on what ticket you're booking. There's no choice. But when people have choice, they will move on. So having that understanding that what experience person is getting. So when I did this math, I found out at 4.4 second in US, people start closing the browser. At 5.2 second in India, people start closing the browsers, right? Which means if the experience application is not responding in that many seconds, you stop it. Japan was 2.2 second, by the way, right? So that's the expectation, understanding, and that expectation will change. Of course, I'm sharing the old data, but now the expectation would have been changed. Now, when you're trying to book Ola, if it shows you like this, I'm sure you're not going to go wait forever. Even though you like Ola, you'll move to Uber because you want to get service done. You're not waiting for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. So that monitoring is important. So this 3 part, if you look at it, any organization can do it very well. Have the good theoretical foundation ready, number of steps, number of click, how it can make it happen. Second part, learn from others, proxy application, you can learn from those. And third, monitor it.
All right. Puneet, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I have a small but important pointer to add that you need not bring everything from ground up. There are a lot of UX tools and resources you can leverage and you should leverage, especially when you're a small company who is starting to experiment with how design can help with your business, right? So there are examples like Adobe XD, Figma. There is Maze for testing, Google Analytics available for tracking behaviors. Then there's so many use templates available for making personas, user journey maps, even synthesizing all this information can be used with ChatGPT. And last but not the least, there are a lot of teams working on coming up with their own design systems, which is kind of taking a lot of UX resources into this effort, right? At this moment, there are so many design systems which are freely available for you to use. So you do not need not reinvent the wheel again and again. You can start seeing how it impacts your customers, how it relates with your brand identity, and then probably after a couple of months, you can start building your own design system. But definitely to start with, all these resources are easily available, freely available for you to leverage as an organization.
All right. I mean, that was pretty informative. We do know, we can make use of tools, but we do have an audience, who might not be aware of the gamut of UX tools now available and which are also free for use. I
Yeah.
mean, who thought even a couple of years back, we were paying hefty dollars for Optimal Workshop and whatnot. However, nowadays we are getting similar tools for free. And it's amazing, where we are moving. So, talking of this, I think we are kind of at the end of our session now. However, we'll take one last question, and this one will go to Itamar. It's more of a sum up of the session, which is like, how do we ensure that UX improvements align with broader business goals?
So there's a little bit of translation that needs to happen, right? Like I've seen, and this is the I think the mistake that a lot of designers make, which is like we tend to be all about users. Users this, user needs that, and blah blah. And we say that we empathize with users, but we don't do a very good job of empathizing with the business leaders of our organization. Like, what are the goals that they are trying to achieve, and so on. So I guess step number one is like, if you really want to make sure that UX is part of the conversations and UX is prioritized, well, then you need to be adding value to the conversation, right? So I think that there's some homework that the design part of the organization needs to do in order to understand, like, what are the priorities of the business? What is the business leader trying to achieve, right? So that we can even speak the same language, right? You're not gonna get, I mean, and I know that this is not a design specific problem, but just think about, like, we keep using this word as have a seat on the table, right? Well, nobody's gonna invite you to a table if they don't know how that relationship is gonna play out, right? Let's say you need to build that relationship in order to for you even to get invited to have a seat on the table.
Right. I mean, that's extremely important. I mean, I know, I mean, at times we also like, I mean, I have heard a lot from other designers that we don't get a seat on the table. I am a consultant now, so for me, I mean, that's not a problem. But I have heard from many designers who are working in like, big companies always saying we don't have the seat on the table. We cannot make business decisions. But like you said, it's very important to align, like, what the stakeholders' expectations are from the like design team, even when we are balancing the same with the user feedback. So it's a very delicate balance, balancing the stakeholder expectations along with user feedback. So I mean, thank you very very much, gentlemen, for for this session. It was very very insightful. To sum it up, like I myself have learned a lot of new things today, which really was pretty new to me. But some of the things which you have iterated, which which you have focused on, are of course are something that are the tenets of design. So one thing I do remember, it's really hard to know if you're actually making a difference if you cannot measure it. So that is something that struck with me. And of course after that also talking about the theoretical foundation, how we can utilize learnings from users and monitor the progress the design is making. So that's a very interesting way of how we can find ROI from the design, that we are implementing in our systems. And along with that, our focus on customer feedback, as in when we are talking of feedback, not just focusing on the bigger things, we also have to we can't overlook the small things also. So for that, we have to have a mindset to be very curious and ask questions about everything all the time, which is something I also definitely follow by. You can see the amount of questions I have asked you today. So I love asking questions, and it's good to know. And this is something I will definitely move forward with. And along with that, there are right tools available currently in the market. We just have to see which ones fit our business goals, and we have to apply them wherever possible to get the best results out of them. And finally, we need to build a context-based strategy, which will also have measurable metrics attached to it, so that the priority should be based on goals, but at the end of the day, the strategy has to be based solely on the context. So that's mostly what I have learned from today's session, and I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all our esteemed speakers who have joined us today and given us their invaluable contributions. Thank you very much for your active participation. Let's continue to contribute to include actionable insights on fostering a very UX-centric culture and identifying opportunities to optimize customer interactions at every touch point. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and thank you very much again for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, team.
Worxwide works for you.